صباح الخير جميعا. أنا محمد الفحام، مكتبة اسكندرية، وأهلا بكم في المؤتمر العاشر لمكتب العربي لهيئة تواس اللي هي أكاديمية العالم للعلوم. احتمال احنا هنتكلم عربي، لكن we have here a number of African friends, so we will try to do it in. It's supposed to be totally in English, but sometimes if you need some Arabic, we may use some Franco-Arab. بعضكم حضر مين حضر معانا مؤتمرات قبل كده أو لقاءات في المكتبة؟ طب مين ما حضرش؟ 2 3 يبقى هنضطر نعمل التمرين مرة تانية. في تمرين اسمه تمرين الصباح أو المساء في المكتبة بنعمله في المؤتمرات، عارفينه؟ طيب نقوله تاني. أنا هعمله لوحدي وبعدين نعمله مع بعض كلنا، عشان أصل في يعني مشكلة في الآخر، أنتوا عارفين أوله بس مش عارفين آخره. إحنا بنرفع إيدينا، إيد واحدة أو الإيدين الاثنين فوق الأول. لا استنى ما تعملش حاجة، وبعدين بننزلها تحت وبنسحب الشيطان اللي في جيبنا، الموبايل، وبعدين بنقفله او نشيل البطاريه او نحطه على السايلنت او تكسره، وبعدين بنرجعه مره تاني. ده علشان ما نسمعش صوته خالص. لكن اذا حصل وسمعنا صوت موبايل بتاع شخص، في قانون في المكتبه في قاعه الاطلاع ان الموبايل اللي يرن بيدفع 10 جنيه غرامه. فاذا رن الموبايل هندفعك 10 جنيه او 10 دينار او 10 درهم، اي 10 وحدات، 10 يورو يستحسن، 10 استرليني يبقى افضل، whatever it is. بس we don't accept credit cards. مفيش حد مضمون اليومين دول، مفيش كريدت كارد. طيب هتدفع ال 10 جنيه او ال 10 دولار او ال 10 وحدات، وبعدين التليفون هيضرب مره ثانيه بتاعك برضه. هنعمل ايه؟ هنعمل ايه؟ لا هنرجع لك ال 10 دولار وهناخد الموبايل. موافقون؟ موافقة؟ I think there is no need to translate it for the African friends here. I think you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the devil in the pocket of each one of us. Anyway, without any further talk, it is my pleasure to invite the Minister of Agriculture and Land Reclamation of Egypt to present his thoughts about the Sustainable Agricultural Development Strategy towards 2030. Please join me to welcome His Excellency Dr. Adel El-Beltagy.
Good morning, colleagues and friends. It's my pleasure to be here with you today, not on an official capacity. I'm one of you. And in a very short time, I will tell you how and why. But let me start by saying that I would like to welcome you on behalf of TWAS, the World Academy of Science, a member of the Council, cover the Arab world. It's my pleasure to see old colleagues who have been active members of the TWAS-ARO. They are present with us here today. Before I start talking about anything related to science, let me tell you that the story of all of us is very interesting. Professor Faham told me that he asked the scholars of TWAS, the members of TWAS, that everybody of them share with us why he's gone to research and what he's doing now, and what was his dreams in the beginning and where he is now. And I think Professor Mustafa Said had a very interesting title from his own school up to being the advisor of the President of the US on science, especially on nanotechnology. Let me tell you my story. I started very early by making experiments on ants. I was very fond with ants. and I used to give them food. I see how they go around. I used to put water in front of them and see how they move and they maneuver, how they organize themselves. I was very fond of the management of the ants. How they communicate with each other was mystery for me, and still mystery. Of course, science now has discovered a lot of things about the behaviors, not only of ants, of other creatures. And then suddenly I became interested in aquatic, deep ocean aquatic, the life in the ocean. And this took me to be very much interested in submarines, structures of submarines and so on. My father was a businessman, and he used to ask me, I used to get up very early to take breakfast with him. He used to ask me what you would like to do in your life. I told him I would like to be, engineering, but shipbuilding and submarines. And he used to laugh. He said, well, this is for now. I don't know how it will end. But this obsession took me to when I was ready to go to the university, I told him I would like to study shipbuilding in the UK, and he made reservation for me in university in the UK and a specialist school, and I was going to leave to go for shipbuilding. Has nothing to do with plant physiology or stress physiology, as my past really was revealed later. And what happened after that? My mother, she was a wonderful lady, but she was, of course, overprotecting, like all I hope that you are not overprotecting like the old generation of our mothers. And she said, no, he's too young to go to the UK now. He should stay here in the university and continue, and then after that he can do whatever he likes, he can travel. And I ended up by going to the, having farms and so on. I used to plant fava bean and other crops, and I was, with the irrigation and the water there, when you have excessive water, there was leaf abscission. And I get fascinated on the senescence, why there is aging on the leaf, why a leaf will drop, why a flower will drop. And therefore, I wanted to know why. And later, I said I would like to go to the School of Agriculture, and I ended up at Ain Shams University. It's not bad university, by the way. One of the best. And I am not biased. Anyhow, I ended up there, and I studied agriculture. And then in my research domain, I wanted to continue outside because I became obsessed with plant hormones in the plant. And one of the hormones was a gas. It was not a chemical. It is a chemical, but it is a gas. And it's called ethylene. I was very much obsessed with ethylene because ethylene pushes the tissue, pushes the cell to aging, and to this, and they come out. At that time, we didn't know why this is happening. Later, I have gone through the research in a lab in the University of Wales, in Aberystwyth, a very distant city. It's only for science. It's a university city. I ended up by working on stress, and then I discovered the relationship between ethylene, which is unsaturated hydrocarbon, and the inducement of senescence and hence abscission in plants. They had early publications within the 70s at that time, and then continued my work on this domain. This does not end up here. When I came back from the UK, I thought that it's fine. We can change things and talk with our graduate students. We can do something different. And my first experience with the old professors in the department, I wanted to put the name of one of my graduate students before my name in a publication. And then they said, no, you are breaking the tradition. These kids, الأولاد دول ياخدوا علينا وده ما يصحش. You have to be tough. Your name should be first. At that time, we had a wonderful dean, Professor Hassan Hamdi, who was educated in Germany, and he stayed in Germany even during the war. He didn't have time to come back. And this wonderful man, I complained to him that the professor in the department is saying this. He told me, don't care about them. I will introduce you to the president of the university. At that time, Professor Morsi, he was a mathematician, and he was the president of Ain Shams University. I told him the story. He said, don't care about them. Just publish it as you wish. And I did. After that, to publish 3 or 2 papers out of a thesis of any graduate student, it was a taboo at that time. This was in the 70s. And I started publishing the papers out of the thesis before it will come out. Anyhow, this will take us to the culture. And then maybe you will hear from the fellows of TWAS. If we don't change the culture of the institution, you have no hope to give a liberal, vibrant, enabling environment to the research workers, the young research workers. If you inhibit them, you have no hope for the future. Therefore, the environment for the research students are the basic element in any research institution. And the management team of the research institution should allow for wild ideas, should allow the freedom for the young people to express themselves fully, and therefore we move faster rather than to inhibit them with what he thinks is right, because what he thinks is right does not move us forward. Having said this, I just would like to share with you a couple of issues that, science for the developing countries is not a luxury. It's not an additional cosmetic token to put and say, we have science in this country. Here I'm talking about the developing countries. Science for them and knowledge for them is an essential part of life. If you don't have knowledge, you don't have change. If you don't change knowledge, you don't have a movement toward improving the livelihood of the people who live in the country. Therefore, it is a must. But how this is going to be mediated, what sorts of modalities we are going to use to achieve this, this is the story of all of you, young and elders. It's the story of how we can make it or break it, because as Dr. Ismail Serageldin has said in this place several times, if the world will speak out, and in several international settings, he talked about knowledge divide. And maybe today as well you will hear this from him, because he is hammering on this, and I hope that he keep hammering this, because it is a divide. It's the worst slavery in the world, that you have this divide, you have people who are ignorant and people who are knowledgeable, and then rather than we talk to each other as human beings, rather than to have peace and prosperity among the world, among equal, there is no equal. It's people who has the lead and people who are backward. And this is not acceptable. And therefore we have to fight. And the young people, the young generation, they have to fight for their children to come, that we need to improve the situation in the developing countries in order that we move forward and move very fast, because we have lost a lot of time. Colleagues, what I'm going to share with you in the time left for me is just a couple of things, how this relate to, for instance, agricultural development in a country like Egypt. Egypt has 52% of its population depend on their livelihood on agriculture or agriculture-related activity. 37% of the population of Egypt live and work in the rural area. And with increased poverty, we have 40%, the poverty indicates people who are under the poverty line. If we go for acute poverty, 20% of the population of Egypt is poor. Therefore, we need to improve the situation. Therefore, the sustainable agriculture strategy in Egypt really focus on change, focus on how we can, with the changes happening around us, things like climate change and issues related to the food crisis, the financial tsunami, how we can adjust ourselves, how we can see the future. We need to focus on the new tools of science. All these elements I'm mentioning here people would think that this is remote sensing. It is there for years. But, I mean, ArcInfo, which used to be used 5 years ago, is not there anymore. The new software now, things is changing tremendously. The genetic engineering and proteomics and genomics and gene mining, all this is changing by not the year, by every half a year you have new innovations and things is moving fast. Simulation modeling, information technology, especially the AI, the artificial intelligence, using artificial intelligence to enable us, to empower us, to manage tools for communication, to manage tools for extension in agriculture is very important for us. Renewable energy, solar, wind, and biofuel as well, things are changing there. New energy saving desalination is highly needed, as it was needed in the past. We are stuck with the batteries and how to improve the batteries to store this energy, as well as in nanotechnology. And I cannot speak with Professor Mustafa Said is here, I'm just mentioning it as a topic, but it's very important. I am not going to go through a lot of reasons, but when we have done this strategy, we had a SWOT analysis where we are and where we would like to go in the Egyptian agriculture. Therefore, we settled that Egyptian agriculture should be repositioned. And to reposition Egyptian agriculture, you need to think about where to go. What's your vision? Then the vision was that we will just move and have a reform, economical and social reform, as well as we need to have a dynamic sector of agriculture, which will be, and we enable this sector to have a very dynamic growth to do what? To help them, to improve the livelihood of the rural poor, especially the rural poor. We have a divide in Egypt in agriculture. You go outside of the Delta, you have very advanced agriculture. In the Delta, we're using sometimes some tools which used to be used in the pharaonic time. And we need to change this. We need to improve the irrigation system. We need to improve agricultural mechanization, as well as improve all sorts of elements which relate to the agro-management techniques. And this is a message. The message is that we need to modernize Egyptian agriculture to improve the food security, as well as to improve the livelihood of the rural poor. And we will focus on human resource development, as well as looking at water and soil, as well as we need to invest on the geopolitical position of Egypt, as well as the different agroecologies in Egypt which we can use. Of course, there is about six main objectives which we have, but the main issue when you say how you prove that this sustainable agricultural development strategy for 2030 will work, I'm putting here in Arabic that you need a political will. If you don't have a political will, forget it. Nothing will happen. The Sultan asked a Turkish general, do you have the army ready for the war? He said, not quite, sir. He told him, why? He said, Zakhira yok, Afendam. If you don't have ammunition, there is no war. And therefore, the political will, if it is not there, you cannot move. We can go and reach and talk. It looks like the Hyde Park corner. You said what you like, and the people who are in the policy, they will do what they like, and nothing moves. Then political will is a must for development. Without getting into the details of the strategy looked at how we can have restructuring for the institution, existing institution, including the Ministry of Agriculture, the NGOs, the civil society, the cooperatives. It has to change. And it has to change, and therefore you have to have sets of law. Then we go to legislation. Up till now, we submitted to the Ministry of Justice and the legislation system, we submitted more than 11 new laws in agriculture related to the farmer as well, related to agricultural development, and we are moving towards this. One of the best killers for Egyptian agriculture when we talk about natural resources is the issue of building on agricultural land. You see this green color in this map is a village, and this is in 1939. And if I press this, it's the same village in 1985. This is aerial photographing. And if I press this, this is the Ministry of Housing has put this space out of agricultural land to be the expansion until year 2022. It's a catastrophe in Egypt. We have a very limited land base. We have 8.6 million acres, and therefore it has to house and clothe. It has to provide food and fiber for more than 90 million people. And therefore we need to keep it for the future. Let me just move. I mean, for the resources, we have, in this strategy, we have 9 programs, and we have about 25 major projects. I only will mention 2. One relates to the improvement of irrigation techniques in the Delta. Here we're talking about 5 million acres, which will end up by giving us 10 billion cubic meter of water, which we can use in the newly reclaimed area. And of course, to do this, you have to use all sorts of mechanization, such as laser leveling, gated pipes, irrigation, and improve the irrigation, on-farm irrigation from 45% to 75% until year 2018. And then after that, you can improve it even further in the future. Of course, structures like this, with hydroponics, you can improve water use efficiency to 95%, because you lose water only through transpiration, evapotranspiration. You don't lose water through evaporation. We have a lot of programs. Therefore, as I said before, it's a set of how we can restructure institutions, and then legislations, and then programs which relate to science. In these programs, we focus on how we can bridge the gap of food production to food consumption, and how we can do this through science. For instance, for wheat, we have self-sufficiency of 62%. By year 2017-18, we would like to arrive to 74% of self-sufficiency, and we'd like to arrive to 81% by year 2030. But we are consuming more grain than the French. Can you imagine in France, they use only 90 kilo of wheat per person per year. In Egypt, we use 180 kilo per person per year, the highest in the world. And in France, you can eat bread with bread. You can open the bread and put the bread inside and eat. I mean, pastry, French pastry is very delicious. You tried it before? Nobody's answering, of course. You are keeping your calories, huh? Yeah. Anyhow, to give you just a glance of what research can do, in the 80s, the Egyptian population was 40 million, and we have self-sufficiency in wheat only 20%. Then in the 80s, we had self-sufficiency 20%. Now we are 2014, and we have a self-sufficiency close to 60%. How it happened? It happened by research, by improving the yield, the quality, as well as agro-management techniques. And this is a research output. If we get this calculated in 1 year or 2 years, what we import from wheat, it will pay for the agricultural research program in Egypt, including the Agricultural Research Center, in the last, say, because it started in the beginning of the century, in 1902, in 1903, in 1910, there was research, agricultural research institution. But the price of 2 years only will cover all the expenses you made through the years. Then it's the best investment you have is the investment you put in research. To cut a long story short, colleagues, this is, for instance, I'll show you some glimpses. This is how we would like to see the Ministry of Agriculture in the future, focus only on legislation, in research, and extension, and technology transfer, and, of course, policy all the time. We would like to reform the, for instance, the cooperatives. You see, the man who's putting his hand like this is a typical Egyptian farmer, and he's wondering what happened through the years. It's the same thing for him. Therefore, we managed, 5 days ago, the president has signed the new law for cooperatives. It liberates the farmers. It gives them the opportunity to form companies for profit. The law in Egypt for cooperatives was inhibiting the farming community to form any company which will make profit. Now they can. Now they can come and participate with us in the very ambitious program for land reclamation. They can form cooperatives, they can work together for profit, not polar form. And it's our duty as a government to teach the children, girls and boys in the village how to be a good accountant, how to change our villages to knowledge village. We have communication with the Ministry of Communication. We had finished 160 village to be a knowledge village. The same style like Swaminathan has done in India. Dr. Serageldin has visited him several times, and I did. And this knowledge village, you teach the girls and boys who are university graduates in the village how they can run computers and connect to the database for market, as well database for agro-management techniques, the new varieties, how the environment is going to change, what sorts of pest control they use, in what disease and all that. All these things it exists. And we have a system called RATCON and VERCON, which was developed by the lab, the Computer Expert System Lab in the Agricultural Research Center in Egypt. Of course, I only would like to mention that we have a law to insure the farmers and to insure their crops. It's an insurance law, and this has already been issued. Which is for the first time we have agricultural insurance now in Egypt. It did not exist before. And of course, this lady then, rather than thinking about the future of her children out of crisis, she will be in a better situation. Of course, this is glimpses of the new crops we are going to focus on. We will focus on crops which will take less water, but it will produce better yield as well as with high cash return. This is an example of a lady. She left her town, she left China, and she's gone to work in Stanford. And of course, we had a colleague here, Dr. Nabil Ala. In the late 70s, he started making the biogas research in Egypt, and he started to spread it in the villages. This lady, having this technology which came from China, is you bring the dung from the animals and you put it in a fermenter, and then you have a methane gas. But this lady, when she was in Stanford, she took this technology, which is Chinese, and she transformed it totally to new fermenters with different enzymes, with putting the input of the new science, and now it's part of the grid of San Francisco. She worked with the city of San Francisco to provide them with this, and this unit now is going to expand. I'm giving you this as a twist of how science, which could be laid down dormant for years, if you activate it and put it in implementation, will make a difference. In countries which is hungry for energy, such as ours, in Egypt, and of course a lot of developing countries having this as well. We need to mix the new expansion in the newly developed land with solar and wind panel. I remember in the 80s having a very close relationship with Italy at that time. We developed a village. It was the only village in Africa, which is 200 acres. This was in the mid-1985. We developed 200 acres, and the 200 acre was run totally in solar, wind hybrid, attached to a fermenter for methane, with sheds for 600 Frisian cow, and all the light, as well as all the stoves in this village, was run with this renewable resources. It was in Al-Wainat at that time. We used to travel with these small planes to go and see it and so on, but it was well established. I left it before I leave to international agriculture. I left it with a desert research center, and then after it ended up in the hand of other people, which is now we are trying with a new ambassador of Italy, I'm trying to bring it back as it was in the past. But this is sketches of what could be in the future. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to visit an area which is close to Al-Alamein, where we will have about 200,000 acres, and it will be based on solar energy as well as intensive fish farming. And it will be very close to Al-Alamein, 60 kilometers from Al-Alamein. We need to focus as well on agricultural schools. We have about 25,000 students comes out of these schools. We have the former Minister of Education here, and he knows this technical education in Egypt need to be shaken up totally, and we need to bring these people. Now we have a joint committee. We need to reform the graduates to be useful to the farms, to appoint them. Of course, issues like computer expert system. There is a very advanced lab in the Agricultural Research Center. There is a genomics lab in Egypt here, which produce drought-tolerant wheat to suit what we have here. Of course, we divided Egypt to different agroecologies, but what I would like to share with you, until year 2017-18, what we are going to have. This is our dream, that we can reclaim about 1 million acres. We can improve the income of the farmers. We can bridge the gap of production in sugar, in wheat, in milk, as well as in maize, as well as double the exportation of freshly produced agricultural commodity, and improve the water use efficiency to 75%. What we really would like to add to this is that we have indicators on all these projects, and now we are training young people to monitor these indicators. Then if you have a plan, you don't say the plan and then you come next year, you repeat the plan again, and there is no monitoring and evaluation. What is your indicators? Where is your milestones? What are you going to achieve in the first quarter, second quarter? And therefore, you need to look at how productivity is increased and job opportunities which is created, as well as the rate of increase in the income of the farmers is very important. And then you can have as well development indicators which could be assessed. Just to end up with, I'm not going to go into finance. We have a wonderful Minister of Finance now in Egypt. He's a wonderful person, well educated, but any minister goes to him and asks for a budget for development, he will say, all what you get from me is a good smile. But what you can do is a smile. Therefore, we are trying to find alternative ways of getting the funds. But anyhow, this is how we see the future of agriculture in Egypt. It will be based on intensive knowledge, which is aiming at not only economical reform, but as well as a social return. And to do this, we need to focus on research and development all the way through. We need to focus on exportation as well as bridging the gap. And we need to focus on communication technology to have a vibrant extension service and to work with the farmers toward the future. Briefly, the human resources in Egypt is the most important commodity. It's not a commodity, it's an asset. But this asset, with the young people we have, when we look at Japan, you look at one of the latest economists, in an article in The Economist, I think about a month ago or so, is talking about Japan as a shrinking society because of the aging. But in Egypt here, we have young society. And this young society, it's either will be an opportunity or it will be a great liability for Egypt. It will be an opportunity if we inject knowledge, if we work with these people for a better future for them and the children to come, and there will be liability and danger on Egypt if we leave them like that in cafes, subjects to people who look ideological and all that, just drifted away from the society. Therefore, we need to focus on human resource development, optimize our water use, optimize our land resources, and do this with the technology, probably improve our policies as well as legislation. And of course, this will be based on funding. And I would like to thank you, and I wish you all the best in the new year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Adel, for the very interesting talk. And I think you join me in to pray to God to bless Dr. Adel and help him in your quote-unquote problems that you are facing in Egypt. Our next speaker, actually, I don't have to say anything about him because you all know him. And he doesn't need, actually, an introduction from me. In one word, please join me to welcome the director of the library, Dr. Serageldin.
Thank you, Dr. Faham. Thank you, Dr. Adel El-Beltagy, for your presentation, which really I'm going to fill in. I'm going to fill in by talking about how we can actually reach this mobilization of the new science. Now, Dr. Faham said for you to take off your mobile phones. I'm going to ask you to tie your seat belts, because I'm going to take you on a roller coaster ride with hundreds of images going very, very quickly. So as a quick prologue, first I'd like to welcome our colleagues from the rest of the African continent, including our President of the Academy of African Sciences, Dr. Biogas, and to remind people that 2/3 of the Arab world is in Africa. That's a major point to emphasize. Whether it's by population, that's 2/3. If you want to count in surface area, more than 2/3. So this is where we are, even if I don't count South Sudan as part of that. Now, we talked about sustainable development. I regret to say that the whole world is behaving like this man, a very foolish approach, like a man sitting on a branch, cutting the branch. And when I spent many years, Dr. Adel and Dr. Magdi know this, in the World Bank trying to convince governments, and in Egypt and elsewhere at the time, they would say, "Sha'arafak al-mustaqbal, what do you know about the future? Tab, when is this branch going?" I said, "I don't know. I don't know how soon the branch will break, but I can guarantee you the branch is going to break." When and how, I can't be absolutely sure, but we know it's going to happen, and it is happening. It's impacting on global agriculture, and Dr. El-Beltagy talked about how we can do what we can do here. But it's already impacting on the Arctic, as we know, in a very dramatic fashion. We're beginning to see this. The people who are denying all of this are now beginning to see its impact. And the only hope for the future of the world is science. Science and innovation are the keys to the future, and that is, of course, the heart of my talk. Now, I would like to say first that as I welcome you all into the Library of Alexandria, especially those visitors who haven't been here, we are in a temple for the learning of science. The ancient Library of Alexandria was started initially as a science academy. It was not called that way at the time. It was called the Museon, or the museum, the temple to the muses, the inspiration, the research. to which was attached a botanical garden, a zoological garden, a dissection room, and a library. And the library grew and grew, and the name of the library dominated the whole complex. But initially, it was a research institution. Now, we have been going through the last 4 years major transformations in the Arab world, as you all know. But I would like to say that this institution, young as it is, has been validated by the revolutionaries. How? Well, we had an unstoppable tide of human beings. Yesterday night we were in this room and discussing with Diyar Ashwan and others this fact that they brought down the Pharaoh and the second Pharaoh. And so now the people have been unleashed. But these huge masses, this is for the non-Egyptians, this is Tahrir Square in Cairo, as it normally should be, and this is during revolutionary times, and at night, and during prayer, and fearless demonstrators, and counter-revolution, and essentially a rejection of the existing regime, and was followed by the rest of the world with great admiration from Wisconsin, Dr. Mustafa. Look at that. Egypt, help us. I never thought I would see a sign in Wisconsin, Egypt, help us. Egypt supports Wisconsin. But what happened here? Well, here, this is the university campus. That is the library. This is the planetarium. This is the conference center where we are. That's the Corniche, and that is Port Said Street. These two streets is where all the demonstrations used to go by. As you notice, the library now has a few little barriers that are but when you have big demonstrations, these mean nothing. And this is to just give you an idea of the size of demonstrations in Alexandria. It's not just in Cairo that we had big demonstrations. And so there I was standing with 3 or 4 of my colleagues on the steps near the planetarium, watching this type of demonstration coming towards us, wondering what I'm going to say when they come close, wondering whether they will listen. And then the miracle happened. Out of the demonstration, the young people came out, held hands. They are holding a sign against Mr. Mubarak, but they held hands and said, "This is the library, nobody touches it." It was a very moving experience, I must say. As you can see, it was a very peaceful demonstration. They just have rolls of paper. And people obeyed them. The demonstration obeyed them. And this is prayer time in front of the library, and see how orderly people were. Now, same crowd, 10 blocks away, 10 blocks away. This was the government house, burned to the ground, doesn't exist anymore. The party headquarters was burned to the ground. So this vote by the young people of Egypt, that this institution of learning, this institution of science, is ours and we shall protect it, was very moving to me. Then they made a huge flag that you see here, and they wrapped the library in the flag. And this is me and colleagues waving as the demonstrations went by. This is on the side of the university, and you can see here they are holding hands because there were no barriers at the time, protecting the library. And I think this is a great vote of confidence, because these two were big demonstrations on that other side. Then these steps became the favorite steps for human rights. When people started feeling discriminated against, they would come to the library. And demonstrations, these were demonstrations against the powerful rise of the Muslim Brotherhood, reminiscent of 1919 revolution in Egypt. You can see here the cross in the demonstrations. But the main point is that 8 years of hard work has been summarized in that contrast. And this very beautiful graffiti that was done on Eastern Alexandria and the Mandara shows, this is from the youth of the 25th of January, dedicated to those who died in the revolution. The 3 pyramids, the 4th pyramid is the library, and coming out of it together, a church and a mosque. It's for everybody, all Egyptians. And this moved some American ladies to write a book for children called Hands Around the Library. and for little children. And this is a cartoon of me. This is supposed to be me. Anyway, here, this is, it was covered by CNN.
Your staff coming back to work? Yes, pretty much. Pretty much. That must feel quite good. Yes, you're getting a sense of order back again?
Yeah, I hope so. I will speak to them, of course, like everybody else. They are citizens, there are different points of views, rumors around that I will speak to them about. See, even our coffee shop started operating.
More than 2,000 workers. Everyone happy to be back. There must have been a moment when you were standing there. There was the moment for you where you think, no, this could happen and they could come in. And then you saw it change.
My confidence is there from the first day. We never built barriers. We never built walls. We never built gates that could be locked. The library is open. The doors of the library are in glass. As you saw on both sides, there's nothing that prevents anybody from destroying this building with all its treasures, except the will of the people. And in the end, that is the ultimate guarantor of everything.
So we had, unfortunately, later on, there were some disruptions. As you know, our Academy of Science was burned down, and we had to save what books we could. This is trying to repair some of the books. This is a copy of the famous Description de l'Égypte, Wasf Masr, which has been totally destroyed, as you can see. These were the efforts to repair it at the Dar al-Kutub. And despite the wonderful initiation, we had a few problems here inside the library. We had a wave of confrontations and discussions and so on with the staff. As you can see, I was right in the middle of things. But calm discussions soon returned everything to normal. And our statue of Prometheus bringing fire to humanity still stands out there. Now, after an initial 18 months transition ruled by the military, Mohamed Morsi was elected. And then there would be disruption with him again, as you all know. He was rejected by the people, and this time we had very serious violence in the streets, as we all know. And you may have noticed some barriers around the library. That's because we have moved from political confrontations and violence to actual terrorism. And of course, although the public and the people have protected the library, and throughout all of this, not a stone was thrown at the library, it becomes a target if you're thinking of terrorism, and that's why we have responsibility to do more. But we remain true to our mission. We work closely with Sheikh Al-Azhar and with the Pope, and we are reissuing a lot of very valuable parts of our heritage to the rest of the world and to the younger generation. But what's most important in the last 4 years, although the library is directly attached to the president, it has become a national institution. This is a commemorative picture with Mr. Mubarak and Mrs. Mubarak and Jacques Chirac and so on. This is our board meeting in 2013 with Mr. Morsi. This is our board meeting in 2014 with President Adli Mansour. And I expect next April that I will be able to have a picture with Mr. El-Sisi, showing that the library is a national institution. مؤسسة قومية. لا تتأثر بالتغيرات السياسية. تخدم البلد كلها، تخدم الدولة، مؤسسة تخدم الدولة. So we've been validated by the people, and we continue our mission to advance knowledge and free inquiry. Now, so welcome to the library. Those of us who lived these days will always remember them. Those who didn't, I hope I gave you a little bit of a flavor of what happened in this institution. Now, science, to me, I summarize our problem in the Arab world, in Egypt, in Africa, everywhere. We must become the producers of knowledge, not the consumers of technology. That's the bottom line. So how do we do this? We build up our S&T capacity, science and technology capacities. We did have a report that was done by the Inter-Academy Council. Mr. Adel remembers that a long time ago. I co-chaired that panel on a strategy for building worldwide capacities for science and technology. And it was endorsed by 95 science academies. and we presented it to Kofi Annan at the UN in 2004, saying about 10 years ago exactly that this is the view of the scientists on how you strengthen capacity in the developing world particularly. So 5 clusters of recommendations. Science is part of society, and there has to be a clear engagement between society and science. So we must organize scientific input of science and so on. Human resources, it's not the amount of education, it's the quality of education. This is a study by the World Bank that sees additional years of education and impact on economic growth. No impact. On the other hand, measuring quality of education, clear impact. So it's quality, not just quantity of education. And we mean involving S&T at all education, imaginative ways of finding new solutions to old problems, such as brain drain. We have to turn it into brain gain. The presence of Dr. Mustafa Said and others of our colleagues who come regularly here is how it becomes brain gain, not brain drain. And in science, remember, we always expect the new to replace the old. There is no authority except a method, no individual thing. And we have values for science. Truth, actually, let me re-emphasize these. Scientists are the people I like best in the world because of the values here. If you were to apply these values to other professions in society, be very different. So we start out with truth. Any scientist who fabricates data is forever banned from all scientific forums in the world. He can interpret data and make errors, that's a different story. But to invent your own data, not acceptable. The second one is honor. Plagiarism is the second worst crime to fabricating data, and totally unacceptable to take somebody else's words and put your name on it. Now, imagine applying that to journalists, to politicians. If you applied the same standards to journalists. But this is what it's all about. Teaching science is not just about remembering Avogadro's number and Boyle's law. It's to internalize these values. Creativity and imagination, we want leaps of the imagination, a constructive subversiveness that replaces the old with the new, and the tolerance of engagement because we don't know where the new comes from. Einstein was 26 when he reversed Newtonian physics. Jim Watson was 25 when he found the structure of DNA. Heisenberg was 26 when he founded his uncertainty principle and so on. But in science, we have a method. Not anything is equal. Not all opinions are equal. We arbitrate disputes with evidence and logic. And that's very important. And Ibn al-Haytham is the founder of that method in the 10th century. So we have to have special outreach for women, and I'm very happy that Dr. Rafia Ghubash is here with us. She's been a pioneer in pushing that all along. We need institutions that will have a certain amount of autonomy and who can do all of this and promote the centers of excellence. We should not be ashamed of centers of excellence and the variability. This is the United States, 4,400 universities. The top 100 universities, this is the number of patents they get. These are all the patents, the top 100, and this is the rest of the universities. So yes, there are some who will be leading the rest by far. And these can create virtual networks of excellence and promote North-South and South-South collaboration, because the best capacity building is by working together. But not all countries can benefit from that. There's a certain minimum level. Very lagging countries, collaboration alone cannot build capacity. More advanced, proficient and advanced countries, we can build capacity by just focusing on more collaboration and joint projects. And that's important because our scientific capacity has to grow to move on. The public and private domain, Dr. Adel mentioned finally allowing the farmers to have for-profit activities. We have to recognize 2/3 of global funding today, almost 3/4 actually, is coming from the private sector for research around the world. So this is now in every field. And finally, and only finally, money. Money is the last thing to come. So in the US, they have what is known as venture capitalists. So here is one of my favorite set of pictures. This is a group of young people, and this was Microsoft Corporation in 1978, and this is Bill Gates. You can see him there. Question is, if young people from Egypt or from Sudan or from Ethiopia or from wherever came to you and said, I have this wonderful idea of something called Windows and it's going to change the world, who would give them several $1 million? That's what we need to support our young people and our imagination. So let's build our science, technology, and innovation capacities. Others have done it, Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, China, and in the West Asia region, recently, Turkey and Iran. Now, I'm going to show you some very distressing slides because they tie Africa and the Arab world together, and it's really depressing. Okay, this is just looking at the Middle East countries, contribution to world science over a 30-year period. At the bottom here, this is Israel, going this way. And then this expansion that you see here in green is Turkey. This expansion is Turkey. This is Iran. This is still the rest of all the Arab world, which you see going there. Qatar, Bahrain, Yemen, Egypt, Iraq, Syria, everybody included. This is Egypt, is this little purple one here. So in effect, you can see that there's been a significant increase in Iran and Turkey. So we're not just talking about US, Germany, we're talking about others as well. This is a case comparing three countries, Iran, Kuwait, and Iraq, contributions to world science. And you can see that Kuwait is doing quite well. Iraq طبعا has been going through a war period, and it's a different story. But Iran has taken up. This is a log scale here, so you should be careful on that. And this is the case of nuclear science and technology papers, a huge increase, almost 100-fold increase in Iranian contributions, numbers of papers and specialties in fields and so on. Now, this is the contributions to world science by region as a percentage of the total over the same 30-year period. You will note this at the bottom here is this is Europe, and North America is here. This is Europe, and this is Asia. And then this is Australia. And so the top line, this line here, is the combination of Africa and the Arab world. Barely appearing on the graph. Okay, how about if we look at it in numbers of papers? Okay, it's the bottom line here. We have to do better. We have to do better. How can we do better? This is China. China and the United States. And you can begin to see how China has come out of its slump after the Cultural Revolution and is moving up and reaching to capture the United States at the same level. So who's leading in the world? Well, this depends how you measure it, right? This is in research papers. This is in patents issued. This is in expenditure, gross domestic expenditure on research. And this is on higher education, number of scientists and engineers. So US is number one in everything. Germany and China and Japan fight for title number 2, depending on which measure you take. And then you have France, UK, South Korea. South Korea has now become number 3 in patents issued. It's amazing, huh? Beats Germany, UK, France, etc. South Korea was one of the poorest countries in the world. It was the 3rd poorest country in the world in 1955. So in 50 years, it replaced UK and France and competes with Germany as the 3rd most productive country in innovation as measured by patents. And of course, many of us have Samsung. Who would have believed that Samsung would replace Sony, and so on and so forth. I mean, we see this all going on. Now, I regret to say that as you go through this whole list, not one Arab country, not one African country. Facts. Okay, this is a different way of looking at it. On the vertical side, you have scientists and engineers per million people. Okay? And on this side, you have R&D as a percent of GDP. And the size of the circle is the actual amount spent. Okay, so that's the actual amount spent. Of course, the big blue circle is the United States. Little countries like Denmark are doing quite well, way up there. Finland is way up there, as you can see. Singapore got there. South Korea, Sweden, Japan, all of it. Again, no African or Arab country except here, Saudi Arabia, showed up because of the volume of spending. As you can see, it's down there. So compared to India, Brazil, Turkey, I'm sorry, there's South Africa here, I should mention. Saudi Arabia is the only one from among the Arab countries, and South Africa is the one from the African countries that shows up here. That's South Africa. So, guys, let's not kid ourselves. We're not doing very well. We're not, in fact, we're doing very poorly. And one of the things is this shows how scientists work with each other. In the United States, most of the science is US-US collaborations, and a little bit of the science is with the rest of the world. And that's how it spreads out to the rest of the world and so on. China, this is most of Chinese science, and a little bit of it is collaboration. And if you look just at the collaborations, then this is what the graph looks like, where the collaborations lie. And of course, they lie mostly with the rich countries among themselves, and we need to build this up and move on. Now, I said that this is the United States, real GDP per capita, and you can see here that industry funding is growing, government funding is staying, other funding, foundations and so on, is not that big. But if you look at it as a percentage, you can see that if the United States has more or less maintained its percentage of spending between 2 and 3% of GDP, it has largely been because the industry and non-federal has taken a bigger role. We are still totally dependent on our governments. Now, how do we get involvement of the public and involvement of the private sector? You have to go through co-design, co-production, dissemination of results, and the academic involvement decreases over time as the stakeholder involvement increases. This is a general recognized pattern that we need to adopt. Now, I'm going to mention very quickly something about the real global revolution that's going on. It's a huge challenge, but it's also a great opportunity. Of course, it's the ICT revolution that's behind that. The internet was the most transformative invention maybe in history. And when combined with the mobile phone, it has now become amazing. This actually is very interesting. Most people don't recognize this. This is the birth of the internet, 29 October 1969, with a big celebration for it in 2009. This was the first message from one computer to another. Vint Cerf, one of the inventors of that, was involved. And the first message on the internet was LO. Do you know why? They used to write log on. And they were writing log on, and LO passed, and then it crashed. But LO was the first message to go from a computer in San Francisco to a computer in Los Angeles. And this was the beginning of the internet. So anyway, Vint Cerf and Bob Kane invented the TCP/IP, which engineering-wise has been able, is still the backbone of the internet till today. Tim Berners-Lee is the third great innovator in that. He founded the www and the HTML language, and then the internet has become anything and everything across political boundaries. It allows email. It replaced, well, not everywhere. In Egypt, there's still a lot of this going on, with this. This is kind of from here to here. We regretfully still have some of the former in the adabir of the government. But it's unstoppable. It's coming. Global knowledge puts at the fingertips of people, databases, online, the whole world. It's unleashing creative ways of doing new things. Now, just how fast this new technology is worth remembering. 2004 was the invention of Facebook. And so it's barely 10 years old. It had more than 1 billion people on it in less than 10 years. 2005, YouTube was invented. The first smartphone was 2007. So smartphone is 7 years old. Today, the penetration in the world, 2 billion smartphones. And for the first time, 2014, we're coming to the end of 2014, there are more mobile phones than human beings on the planet. 7.5 billion phones. So more phones than people, and 2 billion are connected to the smartphones, and 2/3 of internet users use social media. So we have a question of how the combination of social media on one side and information connectivity on the other is doing. The other big revolution, the speed of that penetration is very big, is the amount of information. I really want you to focus with me on what I'm going to tell you now. Scientific experiments like CERN produced to do a reconstruction, a computer-enhanced reconstruction like that of a billionth of a second, takes an enormous amount of computing power, 100 petabytes, equivalent to maybe watching continuously 700 years of full high-definition movies. That's how much information is produced in a fraction of a second in the new scientific experiment. That's still quite small. The South African and Australian science experiment called the Kilometre Square Array will be producing an exabyte of information every day. That is the same amount of information that the whole world was putting on the internet every day in June of this year. By now, it will probably be 2 exabytes, but it was at the time 1 exabyte. Now, more than the amount of internet traffic generated in one day in the whole world. That's what's happening. Now, there's a huge deluge. How will we handle these enormous amounts? It already is being done by what we call the cloud, as you know. But it's not just these. Everybody has been gathering a lot of information. This is typical Amazon. I go in, I look at the poems of Yeats, and look what they tell me here. Customers who bought this item also bought this. So in real time, they are manipulating my profile and the profile of all the other customers. They're looking for patterns, and they send it back to you. The amount of information, every click is recorded, maintained, and analyzed. And they're not the only ones. All these other guys are doing it as well, and the vast computer arrays are doing it. We just discovered what the National Security Agency of the United States can do. The NSA, as you know, would listen to billions and billions of phone calls and find out the one that belongs to Chancellor Angela Merkel, find out the telephone of Dilma Rousseff in Brazil, and so on. This is the operation center of the NSA, and that's the actual NSA. Now, of course, there were reports and so on after the Snowden affair, and people said, well, we're going to slow down on all of this. On the other hand, they just broke ground to double the size of the NSA. So it's not going to happen. Now, how big is big data? Well, this is a University of California study. In 2007, the entire record of human existence from cave drawing till 2007 was 256 exabytes. Entire record. That was in 2007. And as I said, the amount of traffic mid-year in June of this year was 1 exabyte. So at the very least will be 365 exabytes this year. And the KSA project will produce 1 every day. So we're adding data at a very, very fast pace. Now, what's an exabyte? Just to give you an idea. Well, it's a billion bytes. But what does that tell us? OK. It's the equivalent of 100,000 times the entire Library of Congress every day. Now, librarians and archivists and people who are dealing with these issues, suddenly you are in a totally new world. Can you imagine the biggest library in the world, the Library of Congress? 1 exabyte is 100,000 times every word that's in the Library of Congress. And if you take images and digitize them, then it's about 3,000 times. but it's growing exponentially. The amount of traffic on the internet between 3 years, 2010 to 2013, grew 20-fold, 20 times. So we are confronting an exponential rise in information, an explosion of information, and the data is here and more change is coming. This raises issues of technical and physical obsolescence, and I'm working here with Windsurf and others on these problems because I serve on many of these international committees on these issues. What can future be? So we are now not in the old paradigm. There's a totally new paradigm being formed before our eyes. I don't know where it's going. Nobody could have predicted that 20 years ago. I don't think anybody can predict where we will be 20 years from now. But we do know that we are in a huge and deeper knowledge revolution. Now, given the time constraints, I'm not going to go into the 7 pillars of the new knowledge revolution, except to say that it is extremely profound, and I will skip this part and go to the next part, which is that the knowledge revolution really represents an opportunity as well as a challenge for us. Why? Because it has leveled the playing field. Why? Because it makes us, for the first time, able to put all knowledge to all people at all times. We couldn't do so before. Now we have the technology to do it. So it's the dawn of a new age, and we have to embrace it. And in the BA here, in the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, we're very proud to work with Africa. Let me show you something very important for Africa. Well, first of all, we are already a hub of networks, including TWAS-ARO, IFLA, etc. We have a presence in multiple locations in Egypt. We have regional networks, but I want to talk about a little bit about this Elsevier and global positioning. We took from Elsevier and the Dutch into Alexandria. We took the responsibility for a network of making available to African researchers the entire Scopus Science Direct. That's more than 20 million scientific articles are available for free. We have 150 free subscriptions, and we can go over that as well, provided the people are actually using it. So this is the first part of that effort, and that gives access to knowledge to everybody. But the next part was to empower people. So we have a problem. Actually, we asked our friends in Science and Nature and Lancet and British Medical Journal and so on, why do developing countries that have 80% of the population of the world, 27% of the scientists, have less than 3% of the papers? And the answer was usually because of errors in the research method and the statistical analysis. So we created the Research Methods Library of Alexandria. And very quickly, we focused on getting it into Africa. And if you have a problem, you can just reach this. We have 250 top statistical people available to help from around the world. But there's a lot of material on the website, which is called the Research Methods Library of Alexandria, and which includes all of these 20 full research design courses. Ask a research librarian, 250 of them worldwide. There's a Facebook help desk, survey portal, and scientific apps, many thousands, peer-reviewed English language, open source mentor journal, and the Library of Alexandria provides that, and the sample surveys defined for public health really by WHO are available in Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Portuguese, Russian, and Spanish on that, so you can actually use them and be fairly sure they will be published. And we have created buttons like that, Research Methods Library, which a number of institutions in Africa have put on their website. Now, you click on that and you are into the RMLA site. What is amazing for me is that actually we focused on Africa, and we very quickly got 2,500 people involved, 16 centers in 10 countries, the little that you see here. But you will notice here 57 centers worldwide. Now, we are focusing on Africa. Where are all these other centers coming from? Asia. Malaysia, Singapore, China. They called and said, you know, it looks very interesting what you're doing here. Can we join? I said, sure. you can join. So we're making efforts to bring this to the attention of Africa, and these other guys in Asia, without any effort to reach them, they're coming along and saying, I said to my colleagues, this is a validation. I mean, if they are interested in joining without even our telling them to join, it means that the stuff, the material that is there is good. That's why they want to join it. So that's very encouraging. And there's a lot more to come. Now, Africa today has committed itself to a strategy, but none of the countries actually committed have put up 1% of GDP as promised. There were many past declarations, many government announcements. That's also true of Egypt and true of every Arab country as well. So the question is, will it be different? What we have to recognize is this equation is not equal to action. Rhetoric, declarations, plans, targets is not equal to action. My friend Zapiro of South Africa did this beautiful cartoon saying here an AU launch program, English to Swahili, English to Arabic, Arabic into French, and rhetoric into action. We're still missing a key translator, says he, and he's right. So new strategies were evolved. I worked with Kalestos Juma on one panel. We produced Freedom to Innovate, dealing with biotechnology. We also co-chaired this panel for STI strategic framework from 2014 this year to 2024. And what is new here is that we are creating a robust STI foundation with a mission statement and then strategic directions and then implementation. Now, what's interesting is that you set the targets and the initiatives are at the bottom in the enabling environment for implementation. We don't simply say from the top, this will be implemented. We say we have to also work at it from the bottom. And every one of these can then be stretched out into goals. The goals are translated into objectives. The objectives are translated into specific initiatives that can be monitored, and so on, as you see here. So that becomes a summarization of the program that has been adopted by the NEPAD and the ministers. In the Arab world, we're planning to do something similar, but considering what's happening around us, from Libya to Sudan to Somalia to Yemen to Syria to Iraq, it's not that easy to get people to focus right now on science. So I say to all of the colleagues, since this is a meeting of the TWAS-ARO regional, where is the Arab STI plan of action? And I say, like Dr. Adel said to you, it is essential, it's not a luxury. And with that, we will be able to feed the hungry, heal the sick, protect the environment for a whole generation and for the whole world. And thank you.